You might not realize it, but that little piece of metal jingling in your pocket could be hiding a story worth thousands of dollars. Today we're zeroing in on a single dime. Yes, just 10 cents. That's become a legend among collectors, and if you happen to own one, your next trip to the coin shop might change more than you think. Let's start back in the mid-1960s, when the United States was in the thick of a silver shortage. By 1965, rising silver prices forced the mint to change course. The beloved 90% silver dimes were replaced with a clad composition, outer layers of copper-nickel sandwiching a pure copper core. The 1965 dime marked the very first year of this modern design, making it a turning point in American coinage. It bore no mint mark, following a Treasury decision to remove mint marks from all coins that year to discourage hoarding. At first glance, these new dimes looked identical to their predecessors, but collectors soon discovered that certain specimens held clues to their unique production history. If you peer closely at a 1965 dime, you might spot doubling on the date or in the lettering, faint shadows that hint at a die misalignment during striking. These doubled die errors can transform a common circulation piece into a numismatic treasure. The most sought-after variety is the famous 1965 double die obverse, where the date and the word Liberty appear doubled so sharply that they practically leap off the coin. Unlike the subtle doubling found on countless lower-grade coins, these examples show crisply separated lines, and surviving specimens in high grade are exceptionally rare. So what's the market saying? In circulated grades, a standard 1965 clad dime is worth exactly its face value, but once you introduce a dramatic error, prices soar. A heavily double die obverse in mint state, MS 65, has traded at auction for well over $10,000. A top-graded MS 67 example recently fetched $22,000, setting a record for the variety. Even mid-grade pieces, like an MS 63 that displays clear doubling, will command between $2,000 and $4,000 when they surface at major auctions. These aren't your everyday pocket change finds. They're headline makers whenever they cross the block. There's a fascinating anecdote about one collector who stumbled upon a 1965 double-die dime and change at a local diner. Thinking it was just another modern dime, he tucked it away in his desk drawer, only to rediscover it decades later, long after specialists had identified the true rarity of the 1965 doubling phenomenon. That single coin rocketed his collection's value overnight, and it's a cautionary tale about always checking even the most familiar coins under a jeweler's loupe. Of course, condition matters. A heavily worn 1965 doubled die, one that spent years jostling around in pockets, will still command a modest premium over face value, perhaps $50 to $100 if the doubling is discernible. As you move up to AU, about uncirculated and mint state grades, premiums escalate sharply. A negative $55 specimen might fetch $500, while an MS 60 can easily break $1,000. From there, each point on the Sheldon scale adds thousands of dollars, especially when the doubling is crisp and the fields show minimal contact marks. Now, aside from the double die obverse, there's another quirky variety, the off-center strike. Though less famous than its doubling counterpart, off-center 1965 dimes, especially those struck 20% or more off, have attracted plenty of attention. A small misfeed in the collar during striking shifts the design off its axis, revealing blank planchet behind the rim. Depending on how far off-center the strike occurred, these can fetch anywhere from $200 for slight misalignments to $2,000 for dramatic offsets exceeding 50%. Yet another rarity involves lamination errors, where flaking occurs in the clad layers, exposing the copper core. When the clad layer peels away in a patch, revealing a bright copper spot, collectors often pay a premium, generally a few $100s in higher grades. It's a subtle error to spot, but once you know what to look for, it's impossible to ignore. Perhaps the greatest thrill is finding one of these error dimes in the wild, where it still carries the wear and patina of everyday use. There's an unmistakable charm in handling a coin that once slid through countless fingertips, only to emerge decades later as a modern rarity. For many seasoned collectors who grew up pocketing these newfangled clad dimes without a second thought, the 1965 varieties offer a nostalgic link to their first encounters with coin collecting. If you're sorting through a roll of modern dimes, take a moment to look for doubling on the date and lettering. A strong light at a low angle will make the error pop. And when you do spot one, don't rush to clean it. Improper cleaning can obliterate that precious doubling and slash the value dramatically. For circulated examples, preserve the original patina. For mint state pieces, consider slab certification by a reputable grading service to guarantee your dime's pedigree at auction. So next time you hear that familiar clink of a dime dropping onto the counter, give it a second glance. You could be holding a tiny piece of monetary history, an unassuming coin with a story that speaks volumes about a pivotal moment in U.S. minting practices. And if that serial number doubles up before your eyes, you might just have stumbled on a treasure worth far more than 10 cents. And just as the 1965 dime marked a seismic shift in U.S. minting practices, the 1982 dime tells its own tale of change and of errors that have turned a seemingly ubiquitous coin into a modern-day treasure hunt. By 1982, the mint had been producing copper-nickel-clad dimes for nearly 2 decades, but subtle refinements in their striking process introduced new varieties and error possibilities. That year, the Denver and Philadelphia mints resumed applying mint marks to all circulating coins, so you'll find D or P just beneath the wreath on the reverse. After years of near-identical issues, collectors began scrutinizing each tiny detail: the exact thickness of the nickel layer, the sharpness of the reeds on the edge, and the precise spacing of lettering around Franklin Roosevelt's portrait. At first glance, the 1982 dime looks familiar, a radiant bust of Roosevelt on the obverse, flanked by Liberty and the motto, "In God We Trust," with the date and mint mark below his chin. Turn it over and you'll see the torch, olive branch, and oak sprig, symbols of freedom, peace, and strength, surrounded by the legends United States of America and one dime. But if you hold it at just the right angle, you might catch a hint of doubling around the date or a slight misalignment that betrays a striking error. The most celebrated error variety for 1982 dimes is the doubled die reverse. Unlike the more dramatic double die obverse of earlier decades, the 1982 DDR is subtle. Look for slight thickening or shadowing on the left side of the torch and the lettering one dime. True double die reverses from this year are exceptionally scarce, with only a handful of verified examples and high grade known to exist. One of those sold in 2023 for over $15,000, astounding many who had always assumed modern clad coins lacked the rarity of their silver predecessors. Another intriguing oddity is the repunched mint mark, RPM. On certain Philly strikes from early 1982, you can spot tiny secondary impressions of the P mint mark, offset by a hair's breadth. Under 5 times magnification, the double P becomes evident on the wreath side, and these coins can fetch between $200 and $600 in lower grades. In mint state, especially MS 65 and above, RPM specimens have traded up to $2, 500, proof that even minuscule anomalies can spark collector fervor. Off-center strikes also figure prominently among 1982 dime errors. A dime as feed might allow the planchet to shift slightly before striking, yielding designs that are 5% to 30% off-center. Mildly off-center coins, say 5% or 10%, can be found for $50 to $100 in circulated grades, but dramatic offsets exceeding 25% command a premium of $500 to $500, depending on the quality of the strike and how much of Roosevelt's portrait remains visible. Clip planchets are another category to watch. During the blanking process, planchets can sometimes overlap or misfeed, leading to coins that exhibit smooth, curved blank edges where metal was clipped away. A small clip on a circulated 1982 dime might be worth $30 to $50, but larger clips reaching 20% of the planchet's diameter can push values north of $200, especially in higher grades. Lamination errors. where the outer clad layer separates from the copper core, also appear in 1982 dimes. These coins often display flaky patches of bright copper amid the silvery surface. Moderate lamination errors in circulated coins typically sell for $25 to $75. Mint state examples, with crisp details and dramatic copper exposure, can reach $300 or more at auction. Moving beyond error types, let's talk pure rarity. The 1982 proof dime, struck specially for collectors with deeply mirrored fields and frosted devices, was produced in relatively small numbers at the West Point facility. While common in proof sets, occasionally a proof dime slips into circulation. These found in pocket change proofs, showing that mirror-like finish, can fetch $50 to $150, depending on where and whether the cameo contrast remains crisp. Market values for standard 1982 circulation strikes have modestly increased in recent years, thanks to the ever-growing cohort of error hunters. A typical circulated P-Mint 1982 dime is still worth face value, but at MS 65, slabs of these coins can bring $5 to $10 apiece. At MS 67, top specimens trade for $50 to $75, driven largely by collector competition on secondary marketplaces. When it comes to headline sales, one of the most notable took place in late 2024, a near-perfect MS 68 1982 D double die reverse changed hands for $18 750, shattering previous records and underscoring how even modern clad coins can capture collector passion when errors align with superb condition. Another standout sale saw an MS 67 repunched mint mark example sell for $3 200 at a specialist error coin auction earlier this year. There's a charming story of a retired teacher who, during a routine coin roll hunt at her local bank, discovered a 1982 off-center dime with a 22% misalignment. Thinking it might be worth something, she slipped it into her coin album, only to forget about it for a decade. When she finally sent it off for grading, her MS 64 OC 22 specimen was certified and later auctioned for $150, netting her a windfall that funded her summer travels. Condition plays an outsized role in 1982 dime values, perhaps more so than for older silver issues. A worn, well-handled DDR example may still command $300 or more if the doubling is evident, but an MS 63 with similar doubling can fetch $1,000 to $500. As you move into MS 65 and above, the market heats up. Every contact mark and luster variation is scrutinized. An MS 66 DDR might bring $7,500, while an MS 67 could double that figure, especially when pedigree and eye appeal come into play. In circulated grades, collectors often look for coins with strong original luster and minimal bag marks. A -58 Australian dollars RPM coin, lightly worn but with full mint luster, can be worth from $400 to $800. Once you cross in a mint state, certification by PCGS or NGC becomes practically mandatory for securing top prices. Raw coins, no matter how visually stunning, rarely achieve the same premiums. For those hunting these errors, your best tools are a high-quality loupe, a bright LED lamp, and the patience to examine every dime you encounter. Photograph any suspect coins with a macro lens to document the doubling, off-center strike, or lamination. And resist the urge to clean. Original surfaces command the highest prices, whereas a stray scratch from polishing can slash value by 50% or more. Beyond errors, 1982 dimes have a few other quirks that delight specialists. Some exhibit doubling caused not by the dies, but by hub doubling, so faint that only serial number grade experts can confirm it. Others show slight die cracks radiating from the rim toward the torch, adding enough character to interest error-curious collectors, though typically without commanding huge premiums. Whether you're an experienced error hunter or someone who simply finds a pocket full of dimes at grocery checkout, a close look at that 1982 issue could unveil a hidden gem. The combination of DDR, RPM, off-center, clipped planchets, and lamination flaws makes it one of the most versatile error coin years in modern U.S. coinage. And because many collectors focus on pre-1965 silver, these clad dime anomalies still fly under the radar in casual coin collecting circles. So next time you sort through a roll of dimes, pause at every 1982. Let the light dance across the torch and reeds. Peer for whisper-thin doubling, search for a misplaced mint mark, and count the number of reeds around the edge. You might just turn a simple 10-cent piece into a payday worthy of a seasoned numismatist's applause.